The year was 2024. American Congress was talking about aliens. People were making some good use out of modern technology. Oxford University named brain rot its word of the year. And a man named Max was attending a local Yu-Gi-Oh tournament. Max was quietly sitting down at one of the tables. It was in between rounds, so he was just patiently waiting for the next round to begin. But as Max was just chilling, browsing through his phone, he felt a small tug on his left leg. Confused, Max lifted his head up from the screen and looked over his left shoulder. Standing there was a small child, completely red in the face and looking like he was about to burst into tears. "Are you okay, buddy? What's the matter?" "Can I have a Stardust Dragon deck?" A little confused, Max watched as his kid proceeded to reach into his pocket and pull out a few cards. "I don't have much I can trade, but I can trade these for it." Max looked down at the cards. They were some of the most well-used, severely damaged, incredibly fake cards he had ever seen. And to top it off, the text on each card was entirely written in Korean. The kid went on to explain how he didn't have any money and his mother had accidentally bought these cards online, thinking they were okay to use. Max felt terrible for this poor little guy. So, like the Good Samaritan he was, he explained, "Look man, I don't have any Stardust cards on me today, but if you come back next week, I'll make sure to bring one in for you." And so, a week went by. As soon as Max arrived at locals, he began looking around for the kid. Sure enough, after a few minutes, the kid walked through the door of the venue. Max wandered on over to the kid and tapped him lightly on the shoulder. "Hey buddy, I brought the Stardust Dragon deck you asked for," he stated as he reached into his pocket, pulling out a fully sleeved, fully built Stardust deck, complete with its own deck box. But at this moment, Max noticed something a little strange. The kid just stared at him blankly. Not a single ounce of excitement or basically any emotion at all coming from the kid's face. He simply reached over and took the deck from Max's hand before placing it into his pocket, turning and walking away without saying a word. That's a little odd. Max wasn't exactly doing it to receive thanks or anything, but he kind of expected the kid to get at least a little excited about his new toy. But whatever, Max had done his good deed for the day and was just going to enjoy the rest of the event. Once again, Max had decided to attend his locals. The tournament was just about over at this point and Max had just finished his final round, so he took a seat at one of the tables and patiently waited for the results of the event. It was at this moment, once again, Max felt a little tug on his left leg, and sure enough, once he turned around, he was met by the boy, again looking like he was about to burst into tears. A little more reluctantly this time, Max asked, "Hey buddy, what's the matter?" Can you give me a Diabellstar deck?" Now, for a bit of context, the deck the kid was referring to was Snake Eye, an archetype which at the time was the single best deck in the entire game, and also the single most expensive, with an average list costing anywhere between $700 to over $1,000. Max just sat there silently, looking real confused. What on earth happened to the fully built Stardust Dragon deck he'd given this guy a week earlier? And why was he now looking for a Snake Eye deck? But before he could have either of his questions answered, the kid continued. "My Sprite deck just isn't good enough." Huh? His what now? This kid has a Sprite deck? Sprite is another very powerful art type that had also been one of the top decks not too long ago. So why'd this kid have a Sprite list? Didn't he only own some fake-ass Korean cards until Max gifted him the Stardust deck? Speaking of which, where is the Stardust deck? This time around, Max was much more reluctant to help this kid out. But it still was a child on the verge of tears standing in front of him, so he once again somewhat caved. "Look man, I can't give you the whole deck, but I can give you some of the pieces I have extra copies of." Immediately the kid's expression switched back to the deadpan look he gave him the week before. "Okay, I'll just get mum to buy me the rest." This just left Max looking even more puzzled. The same mum that couldn't afford more than some fake, heavily used Korean cards would be able to buy him a $1,000 Snake Eye list? Even with Max contributing some of the cards, it wasn't going to be cheap. But whatever, at this point Max was pretty over it, and so without thinking much more of it, he handed over the spare cards and sent the kid on his way. The tournament had officially concluded, and so Max and a large group of players from the event were just chilling in the card store, when the topic of a certain kid came up. One of the players had a bit of a story to share. Yo, did you guys see that poor kid earlier? I beat him in round 1 and he looked like he was about to burst into tears. He then showed me this pile of fake Korean cards. Apparently that's all he had to trade with. Max immediately sat up in his chair and slowly turned to look at this guy. And to his surprise, he wasn't the only person that turned. So, what exactly did you do after he showed you the cards? Oh, I felt bad for the kid. He asked me if I had any decks I could give him. I happened to have my Sprite cards on hand, so I just gave him that. Though I had taken out some frogs earlier from the deck, but he insisted his mother could just buy the rest for him. That's funny. Max turned to his left to see another player now chiming in. I also played against a kid in round 2 who gave me this big sob story about only owning fake Korean cards and asked me to buy him some frogs. I thought it was a bit of a weird request, but I felt bad, so I did. Huh? Yet another player now chiming in. I played against a kid in round 3 who also gave me a sob story, showing me a whole bunch of fake cards, claiming that was all he owned, and so I gave him a bunch of imperms and ash blossoms. And that's when Max told his side of the story. Once he'd finished, the room fell silent as the 4 men just stared at each other. It was at this moment they realised they'd all been swindled by a sociopathic child. And that brings us to the end of today's tale. Thank you so much, Jeff Jones, for sharing your story on Twitter earlier this year. And as per usual, if you too have a story from your time playing Yu-Gi-Oh! And would like to have it recreated in this series, feel free to write it down in the comments below. Just make sure to leave enough context and detail so I can turn it into a full video. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And if you'd like to see more stories just like this one, I've created a full playlist of this series, which I'll leave at the top of the description, or you can click that little card on screen now. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one. Laters.